Starscream here, and I am the Lord and Master of the Geekcast Radio Network. Don't tell Megatron.
Hello and welcome to episode 142 of the Cinema Geeks. I'm one of your Cinema Geeks Optimus Solo, and joining me today, as always, is HardCandiMandi.
Hey dudes.
You're here?
I'm here.
And we are dudes.
You are.
MovieRevolt Dan, hello.
Hello.
And Mr. Fridley Cent. How's it going, Matt?
I'm a dude.
Yes.
He's a dude. She's a dude.
We're all dudes.
Hey.
All right, and we are here to give you a review of a new movie. That's right.
Good Burger 2.
No. That would be the Spider-Man Homecoming movie, the newest film from the Marvel Cinematic Universe slash Sony Pictures, I guess you can call this, if it's a mashup of sorts. Released a couple weeks ago here, directed by John Watts, starring Tom Holland, of course, as the new version of Spider-Man, Michael Keaton, Jon Favreau, Zendaya, Donald Glover, Marissa Tomei, Robert Downey Jr., and I could probably name a couple others, but that's good for now. This movie is making a lot of money at the box office, scoring real well on Rotten Tomatoes, but ignore all that. The Cinema Geeks are here to tell you what is good and bad about Spider-Man Homecoming. So, before we get to actual Homecoming talk, Amanda, what's your experience or fan level as far as Spider-Man? Do you like Spider-Man? Do you not like Spider-Man? And what was your take or rough feelings on the first 5 movies? Or 4 movies, or however many there's been.
Loved the cartoon from the 90s. It was on Fox or whatever. Love that. Watched it a ton. I've never read any of the comics, but I've seen all of the Spider-Man movies. And I always liked them. I thought they were pretty great.
Are you a fan of, before going into this one, what did you like the best? The original 3 Spider-Man or the Amazing Spider-Man or what?
I did enjoy like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans. But getting Andrew Garfield was super cool too. I liked him. Like I'm not able to really pick between the two, I guess. I think I liked maybe Andrew Garfield better as Spider-Man, but I liked the content of the Tobey Maguire movies better.
Okay, fair enough. Matt, what about you? What's your fandom level for Spider-Man, and what's your take on the previous films?
Well, I also grew up with that same Spider-Man's cartoon, but I've read just a bunch of comics because that's my thing. I really loved Spider-Man as a kid. Loved him. Probably my favorite one. Like, if you would ask my parents as a kid, they like, hey, what superheroes is Matt like? Spider-Man would be the one. That's who they always got me the toys of. I have 1,000 Spider-Man toys. Like, I've got the 6-armed dude. I've got the half-spider dude. Like, I've got them all. With the old movies, I think I lost interest with the Tobey Maguire, each one a little bit less, and I didn't even see the third one. I remember going to the theater and it being sold out and being like, yeah, that's good. I don't need to see it. But the Andrew Garfield ones were amazing. I was pre-ordering tickets. I needed to see those. I love that they went back and did Gwen Stacy, something again that the cartoon just skipped right over. That's great from the classic history. I think they did a really good job staying true. And you know, I've always been the guy that says like, hey, stay true to the comics. Like, stay true to the source material if you're gonna reference something, like reference it properly, right? You know, and the Electro thing got a little weird, and I didn't like that. But ultimately, I liked the Amazing Spider-Man movies a lot more.
Interesting. Okay. Spider-Man for me was the only comic book character, or the only superhero comic book character I liked as a kid. I had like some Spider-Man coloring books and whatnot, and I for some reason just liked Spider-Man more than Batman, Superman, etc. I didn't even know who Iron Man was at the time. But I didn't watch the cartoon. I've never read any of the comics. My only experience was just kind of just knowing who he was until the Tobey Maguire films. I've liked almost all of the Spider-Man films. There's not been very many that I've like just outright disliked. So, but there's none that I've been like over the moon, like in love with. So I've liked them. I know a lot of people put Spider-Man 2 as probably one of the best comic book superhero films of all time. I need to rewatch all the original ones because I was never blown away by any of them, but I think they're all good. So I like aspects of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, and I like aspects of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I like Andrew Garfield better in general just to watch on screen as an actor, but I think you can separate them from the content of their movie a little bit in some ways. And I did like the Gwen Stacy story and stuff like that, but like I said, I think there's aspects to like and dislike throughout both series. I would have liked to seen what they did with the Andrew Garfield series if they were allowed to, but obviously they weren't because of all kinds of different things. Dan, what kind of level of Spider-Man fan were you? And I know you're a big fan of the Tobey Maguire film, so how did all the previous films stack up for you?
Yeah, I am a pretty decent-sized Spider-Man fan. I've read I saw a amount of Spider-Man comics, mostly from the 90s. I just recently started reading some of his more classic stuff. I've been going through, starting with Amazing Fantasy 15 and working my way through, which is honestly a little rough at times. You know, some of the 60s comics don't hold up super well, but it's interesting kind of just seeing how much he's changed as a character. I love the Raimi film, the Spider-Man one. You know, there's some things that maybe don't hold up as well. You know, the Green Goblin costume obviously has its issues, but I still think that as an origin film works extremely well. I think Spider-Man 2 is one of the best, still one of the best of any comic book movie, period. I liked the first Amazing Spider-Man enough. I enjoyed it. I wasn't a big fan of, like, the Lizard. I actively disliked Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think what the Amazing Spider-Man films did right was the relationship between, Gwen and Peter, in large part due to the performances of Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone. I just felt like the cast around them was never as strong, and also wasn't a big fan of the way that Peter Parker would act at times. Like, he felt very jerkish, and like it felt like he didn't have that. Like, I don't know, there was something like that was missing from him a little bit, but like I said, I did feel like they did have elements that worked really well. And I'd be curious. I was actually kind of curious where they would go with it, because I know they were building the kind of Sinister Six. Right. And I think there are. I've only saw Amazing Spider-Man 2 once, and I've always wanted to go back and rewatch it and see, because there are some bits I think that get lost. But, yeah.
You mentioned something. That was probably the only reason one of the main reasons why I was interested in the Amazing series was because of the Sinister Six teasers that they had kind of wanted to see where they'd go with that, but obviously that is not to be. But let's get into Homecoming a little bit here. Get your guys' initial reactions and what were your first thoughts just right away when you were watching this film, you got done and you're leaving the theater. What was the initial take from you, Amanda?
I feel like it felt young and fresh, and I want to say hip. I don't know. It had that kind of vibe for me, and it was definitely a modern take on things. And I liked that Peter Parker was able to be like a kid in this. I think that was, one of the shining spots in this rendition.
So fan or not fan right away?
Yeah, I would say I enjoyed myself throughout.
Okay. Matt, what was your initial take on Spider-Man Homecoming?
My very first thought coming out of the theater was, that was a pretty good movie. Like, they did a good job making a movie. Like, I think that's, like, I enjoyed this as a movie. I wasn't super wowed, but I wasn't disappointed in any way.
Fair enough. Dan, what about you?
It was interesting, and then way back when we talked about our most anticipated movies for this year, and I wasn't super anticipating Homecoming. I think, it was the third reboot, and I don't know. I think mostly worried about Vulture. Like, I didn't love the look of him, and I'm just like, I don't know if it was going to work. And I ended up really enjoying this quite a bit. I don't necessarily maybe put it as the best Spider-Man movie, but I think it definitely has elements that certainly work very well, especially the cast. I think the cast is what really sells this film, and they elevate the material, especially Michael Keaton. But I walked away very happy. It was, enjoyable, maybe a little, quote unquote lightweight per se, but as an entertaining movie, it was very successful.
And it's obviously a different take on Spider-Man in a way, as far as what age and what time period and kind of the feel of Spider-Man that we're going for. let's get right into that first. Like, how do you think Tom Holland played Spider-Man in comparison to Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or just on his own? Like, what aspects did you like and dislike about Tom Holland's portrayal of Spider-Man, Amanda?
I think that he had, the wit and the I don't know, like the way he moved and how he presented himself physically. I feel like it was a good representation of Spider-Man. I didn't get his brains as much as I would have liked. Like, he didn't seem like the smartest Spider-Man. I don't know if that was just me not picking up on it or what, but I mean, you could tell that he was smart, and based on, like, he was in this, like, what was that little club he was in? Some kind, I don't want to call it like a debate team, but they knew trivia. They knew
Breakfast? Was it Breakfast Club?
No, she hasn't seen that. She wouldn't know anything about that. The academic club, basically.
Yeah.
The decathlon or whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, you knew that he was smart because he was in this, but I didn't see him using his intelligence really. So.
Okay. Well, and obviously with all the Spider-Mans, we have differences as far as where their web comes from and some of the actual physical parts that has been portrayed in different ways, the different suits that they've worn, et cetera, et cetera. So how did this version of that stack up for you, Matt? Was there aspects you liked more that were different from the other versions, or was there some stuff that you thought was a negative?
Well, we don't know where his web formula came from. Like, we just assume that he came up with it, because at one point it shows him like, hey, web formula version 6.0 or whatever, and he's like jotting down notes and he's like testing things in chemistry, but it's not going well, or is going well. I don't know. It was webby and sticky and everywhere. So, and he has like web juice just like in old like booze growlers or whatever stashed throughout the school, right? So like I feel like we don't get nearly as much. Like, this is not an origin movie, right? This is a reboot, but it's not an origin story. So we don't really, we don't know the circumstances of like Uncle Ben's death or the web formula. We get to see an earlier costume for sure, but this new one is from Tony Stark, and I kind of liked that element, especially because there's a couple of moments in there. Like, one, the Tony Stark armor and how much it's tracking him and watching his movements, GPS and visual, and how he rebels against that. Plus some of the elements of him being an amateur superhero, right? Like, he's not an Avenger. He's just, a friendly neighborhood spider. But he's also kind of, like, pissing off the actual authorities. He butts heads against the police and the FBI and things like that. That actually just ring very true of the original comic version of Civil War, to the point where I'm almost upset that we already got the Civil War movie and that we won't be able to get it with this Spider-Man. Because, like, in the original one, Spider-Man eventually rebels against Tony Stark and switches sides. Like, so it's almost like they're bringing in certain elements from the comic books that weren't, addressed in the other movies, like, at all, and giving us a different take. And I can't say that I like it more or less, but I really do enjoy it. Another
thing that sometimes people differ on is whether some of his powers or whatever are more organic or more kind of like in his DNA versus armor or objects that he controls. Like whether the web's actually coming from his body, his arms, or whether it's from a web shooter, or I think a lot of people have been talking about the Spidey sense and, maybe a lack of that being shown, possibly, at least at this point in this film. Not to say it's not going to come in later on. So how do those things also play into it, Dana, and how do you kind of stack up this version of Spider-Man comparatively?
I mean, I don't know, that piece, like, I think in a way, yes, this isn't an origin story, but in a way it is. It's kind of like Batman Year One, and but we just kind of skipped the first chapter of kind of like how everything begins. And I was okay with that, because I'm like, it's a really challenging situation you're kind of they're put in this. It's like they kind of put themselves in, but whatever. Where how much do you kind of harken back to the origin? And I think they like lightly tapped around it, which I think makes the most sense. And I think they just kind of let opportunities to kind of dive deeper into that maybe in later films. Like, there's some mentions of, like, Aunt May's going through something right now, which could obviously be a reference to Uncle Ben. They're, they talk about how he was bitten by a spider, and so there's, we don't see how he built his suit and things like that. But I feel like, at this point, we didn't necessarily need to. But what I really liked about this Spider-Man that I think we didn't get, and yeah, Tom Holland has the charisma, he has the quips, but he also has a vulnerability that none of the other Spider-Mans have. He feels like a kid, and there's specific sequences where that really pays off, where you can see the fear and frighten in his eyes, where he seems like he feels like he might actually not get through this, where you don't necessarily get that with a lot of the other villains or characters. Captain America feels you never feel like he's gonna fail. Iron Man the same way, but for Spider-Man, he you could see why, largely due to the performance of Tom Holland, why he would think that maybe this is it. Why maybe this is, I'm thinking of a specific sequence where he finds something out regarding the Vulture that is especially powerful in that. So
I agree. Yeah, I think a lot of people too have commented on the fact that we actually have a young person playing Spider-Man. I don't remember what the exact ages Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were when they portrayed Spider-Man compared to Tom Holland, but I think a lot of people were kind of pointing to the fact that this was more believable as a teenager, as a high schooler, obviously, when we got Tom Holland as this compared to the other two who were a little bit more well-known at that point. Getting into, because one of you guys mentioned that Iron Man had given him his suit, and a lot of the quibbles or people's thoughts as far as things that they thought they might dislike was the level of involvement of Tony Stark, Iron Man, in this film, and if he was going to be too much or not enough. I don't know what people wanted exactly, but how did you guys feel like the involvement from Iron Man was? Was it the right amount? Did he interact in a natural, way that made sense to the film? Did you feel like it was shoehorned at all, or how did you feel like that worked? Matt, start with you on this one. How do you feel like the interaction between Tony Stark and Spider-Man worked?
I thought they did a perfect job including showing that this was in the Marvel universe, right? I think that Tony Stark was a perfect character in this movie. His interactions were exactly what we needed, and they helped drive the plot along. They weren't just hey, look, we've got a cameo from Robert Downey Jr., but we've put it in there 3 times. He did a really good job of moving along the plot. But beyond that, the other characters, you get, you see a Captain America in the background, you see Happy, you see these other characters, and it feels like it's in the Marvel universe, but not forced in. They didn't just shoehorn Spider-Man in. It just feels and then, they even addressed the Civil War movie, and it feels real and he belongs and he's been here the whole time.
Amanda, agree or disagree?
Yeah, I think that the only thing that I found a little disappointing in the interaction with Tony Stark, or the amount that he was involved, was we didn't get to see much of him as Spider-Man figuring stuff out on his own without this hindrance. I think that would have been in an origin story, so it's not a super detriment, but it was just weird to not see him starting on his own and figuring stuff out. He was figuring things out around these new parameters, basically, that are on his life with Tony Stark's involvement.
Okay, makes sense. Dan, what did you think about the involvement of Iron Man and the percentage of the film that he's in, I guess, or the impact he has? Was it the right level, or do you think they could have they took any missteps in that?
It was a lot less than I was expecting, and I think maybe this is from watching the trailers or certain sequences where I'm like, okay, when is that going to happen? It still hasn't happened yet. Maybe it'll be the end sequence. Maybe it'll be the secret scene at the end. I was just waiting, and it, never occurred. I thought it was a decent amount. It was effective when it was there, and they didn't overdo it. I think he was probably in the trailer more than he was in the actual movie. So I didn't have any issue with the way they utilized him. I thought it was. I wasn't expecting to see as much Happy Hogan as we did, and maybe they kind of went to his joke maybe ran a little stale by the end, but I enjoyed the interaction between him and Tony and Peter.
Do you agree with Matt that they succeeded in making this feel like a natural part of this universe and part of the Marvel cinematic world?
Definitely, I think so, and how he fits in it, and I think specifically in like utilizing the kind of the smallness, if that's a word, and like of Spider-Man's world, and how he's not the character that's down in swinging around Avengers Tower. He's in the middle of Queens. He's in Long Island. Even like in DC, like it felt like he wasn't. Even though this is the third. Or the third edition of Spider-Man, it felt fresh because they really kind of took him out of the scenery we've been kind of accustomed to seeing him in, which I think allowed that to work even more.
Dan, you had also mentioned that one of the highlights for you was Michael Keaton's portrayal of the villain in this film, Vulture, something that you were kind of apprehensive about at the beginning. How do you think Vulture works as a villain, and is this one of Marvel's better villains, or how do you think that all came about, and without giving spoilers away for, obviously, towards the end?
I think Marvel was smart in the fact that the opening sequence, we understand the motivations of the villain. They're not very complicated. They're in a way timely. They very much reflect that of the Marvel universe, and especially when you look at like Tony Stark versus the Vulture, and there's he could probably go into spoilers a little bit more and explain how those relate more. But I think a lot of it too was the performance of Keaton. And how he was able to make it work, and he was a character that you understood what he wanted. He wasn't too evil, maniacal. He wasn't going out to end the world. He was just trying to kind of, as he said multiple times, to do it for his family. And he must have watched the Fast and Furious movies over and over again. But so I think he works in that. Exactly. So I like that. I do think when it came to like his functionality and the action sequences as a character, that's maybe where it faltered a little bit. Like I felt like the fighting between Vulture and Spider-Man, it worked, but it wasn't like it didn't have that visceral reaction I was hoping for. But I think on a more character standpoint, it was much more effective than I thought it would be.
I agree. I think, first of all, I think Michael Keaton should play more roles like this. I think he's a good villain, and I really believed him as this character. I like the look of him as Vulture, but I agree with you. The functionality of it caused maybe some of the biggest problems I had with the film, because some of those action sequences involving him as Vulture were almost impossible to decipher like what was going on, at least for me. One of our friends that we watched the film with said it reminded him of the first Transformers film, actually, when all you can see is just shards of metal going every which way and you have no idea what's happening, who's hitting who, or what to make of it. I got that feel a couple times with the Vulture in action, especially obviously on the aircraft. That to me was hard to discern at times what was going on, but maybe that's just me and I'm getting old and becoming a senile old man. But Amanda, what do you think of Vulture as far as a villain goes?
I think that Michael Keaton was great in his role. I think he is like a good villain. And with this villain too, like you said, the stakes weren't super high. It's not like he was trying to drop an entire city on the planet or anything like that. He was just trying to, stay greedy, stay hungry, and, put his kid through college and crazy stuff. And I think that I liked his motivations. I think it was more real. Like, I can relate to a villain like that a little bit more than I can some villain who fell in a vat of toxic waste or something. So I think that portrayal was pretty nice, and also it fit with the neighborhood Spider-Man vibe, to where the stakes were not too high, but then bystanders were getting hurt and it got serious, it got dangerous, and the stakes did jump up a bit when other people were involved. So I think that it was the right level of danger, and it all kind of fit cohesively together with the vibe of him staying local and him doing stuff in his neighborhood, and then the villain being, on the same level.
Matt, how high in the ranks do you feel like the Vulture flew himself up as far as Marvel villains goes?
Well, when I walked out, the guy I was with immediately said that was the best villain they've had, like, besides Loki. Like, he's probably the best villain they've done. They've done it right. They did it right. And I don't know. I guess I don't ever feel like they do a terrible job, but I do think they did a great job with it. I do just love the down home feel, like it. Like after the Guardians of the Galaxy, like saving the like what they did, one movie where they fought a god and another movie where they fought a god, and like the Avengers, like bringing together, like just all of these giant movies into one big thing, and they're like to have this like low key feel of like, yeah, we can have just a working stiff fighting a teenager, and it's like in the same universe, and it's still a good movie. And I love that they managed to do that feel. But what I also love about the Vulture is like I've always said it, like if you want to follow source, like if you're gonna do a thing, follow source material. But the Vulture's a wonky one, right? Like he could fly, he's an old man, and then he like steals youth from people. And I don't even know how that works. But what they did with this one is they took the Vulture and they're like, how can we make this guy work? And they're like, well, vultures, pick apart the dead bodies, like, so they've just made this guy a scavenger. Like, he's a scrappy scavenger. He is a vulture. Like, they managed to keep elements that worked and still made it believable and in their universe. And I like that they could manage to do that without making it hokey and without making it terrible.
Nice. I hadn't even thought about it from that angle, but that makes a lot of sense too. I kind of agree with you. That's a nice touch to it. Getting into some of the other characters or just general thoughts to anybody that we haven't talked about yet before we get into some other elements of the film. We have people like MJ and Ned and Aunt May and a variety of others. Who worked, who didn't work, or what were the other highlights for you, Dan, as far as the cast of characters?
I mean, I love the friendship of Ned and Peter. Like, that was, to me, like, that brought a lot of the life to the movie, I feel. And it did feel like, what if two kids and two teenagers, or, one became a superhero and the other one was his best friend. I did love their interaction a great deal. And the whole lot of that, the high school stuff was a big part of what worked for the film. Was it, but yeah, that was probably the biggest standout character for me.
I agree. I like Ned a lot. I love the fact that he tells him this, and you almost immediately know that he's not a person that can keep secrets. But that there's going to be some way that he outs you, or some way that he says something that he's not supposed to, or whatever, because he's just so enthralled with the idea that he knows the Avengers, or that his best friend is going to up his social status in some way, shape, or form. So I thought he was hilarious. It's probably one of my, if not my favorite character in the film. Amanda, any other characters, or did you like him too, or who else stood out, or maybe who didn't work for you?
Definitely Ned. I think MJ was a little bit of a mystery in this. Maybe she was supposed to be, though, so we'll see more from her, I bet.
Matt, any characters that stood out more than others for you, or anyone of them that didn't work?
Gotta agree with Dan on Ned. These short names, man. I think they did a great job with that. Honestly, I think throughout the movie, MJ, I was like, where's MJ? And the reveal, and it's like, oh man, MJ's a great character. I love MJ. Like I didn't expect her to be in this. I'm a little sad that they're going straight to throwing in Mary Jane before Gwen Stacy. But we'll see what they do, because there's going to be more, because this one's just doing, bonkers at the box office.
Absolutely. Other elements that you guys want to talk about the film, maybe the comedy, the action, favorite moments, favorite scenes, things that worked, things that didn't work. Amanda, start with you. What other things would you like to mention about the film?
In the most non-spoiler way possible, so the test that's at the end, or what he perceives as the test, I almost wish he would have accepted the offer instead of, conceding what he's going to, or what he does. I think it would have been cool to see that next step then, but, I get why it didn't happen.
Anything else about the film that you want to bring up? Moments that you loved, liked, disliked, anything?
I think I like the look of the suit. I like the functionality. I am one of the fans of having the web actually come out of his body. But, you gotta take it for what it is when it's the web shooters. I think it adds another element of tension or something if he runs out of this fluid or whatever, but I wish it would come out of his body like he's a legit spider.
I think one of my favorite scenes was probably when he was testing out all the different functionalities of the shooter and the different ways it could, in the warehouse or whatever you want to call that bunker type place, warehouse that he was at. I thought that was a lot of fun. I could have even watched a few more versions of what he was able to do with that as far as the programming. I thought that was a lot of fun. Dan, other elements of the film you liked, disliked, things that worked or didn't work?
I thought that this movie had a really tight rope to walk in a way where they're trying to reintroduce this character to this new Marvel universe. Do that in a way that you're not rehashing the same things you've done for 2 franchises previously. Make it an entertaining movie, bring in this new villain, create a new world, and there were a lot of different things it was trying to do, and I felt like it pretty much accomplished all of them. Maybe there are a few things they can probably increase, but it does feel like a movie that's playing for the long haul. I think what really works for it is the cast of characters that kind of are built up, and ones that are all feel very unique, all feel like they exist in the Spider-Man universe, but in a more modern time in different ways. Especially the high school characters. I enjoyed the relationship between him and Aunt May and with Marissa Tomei, but I wish we got a little bit more of that. I feel like that was maybe one thing that was a little bit missing, was the kind of how family in a way motivates Peter. But I liked how it ultimately, this is the same lesson that Peter has to learn in the first Spider-Man films. Learning the power of responsibility and kind of understanding his role and utilizing it the best way he could. And I liked how he may not be hearing the power, with great power comes great responsibility, but you have kind of this mechanical suit in a way to represent that, which I thought was very effective. And, I thought, that there were a lot of, or one specific twist, which was one of the best moments in this film. Your things are working right when, being stuck in traffic leads to one of your best scenes of any Marvel film. I know a lot of people make kind of the comparison to John Hughes, and I get that. But I think the one thing that John Hughes films had that this didn't necessarily was John Hughes and they utilizes music, especially music of the time, where this didn't. And maybe that's something maybe they didn't want to harp it on what Guardians of the Galaxy does. But I think that's something to consider for the next movie. Because I think when it comes to a teenage film, modern music is a big part of that. Because it certainly defined a lot of people in their high school years. But
yeah.
But ultimately, I think the thing that makes it work is that it's just unequivocally fun and entertaining. And from seeing him, trying to swing through, Long Island or whatever, where there's no buildings, and how great that was. So I don't know. I it gave me that that excitement I look for when it comes to a Marvel film.
Absolutely. Matt, what do you think? Any other moments, scenes that stood out to you, or anything you didn't like about this film?
I do like. I just always want to say that I just love how down to earth this movie is. And like I said at the beginning, when I walked out of it, I was like, hey, that was a good movie. And the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I love it. I think they did a great job. I don't want to say best Spider-Man movie ever, but good enough that I could consider it, right? It's that good. Nope, I lost it. Dan's right, though.
All right. Final thoughts before we get into a spoiler section. We'll do final thoughts and we'll give it a grade, and then we'll kind of get into a tiny bit of spoiler talk. So, Amanda, anything else to say about Spider-Man? What kind of grade would you give this film?
Oh man, I think that I would have liked to see a little bit more of him, his action involved in day-to-day saving of people, more than that one little montage that we get. I would have liked to see more web slinging and, helping get dogs out of the trees or cats out of the trees or whatever it is, and more than just one little blurb of that. I think I would have liked a little bit more of that. And I think that Dan's right, the soundtrack was a little weak and it didn't really use any popular music that really engaged you. So that's something I didn't even think of until Dan brought it up. But grade, I'll give it a 7.5, 8.
Which is it?
8.
All right. Matt, what do you think? Final grade and any other thoughts you didn't get out?
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't found that thought that I was chasing the last time. So I'm gonna go with 8 as well. Like it hasn't rocked me to my core like any other movie, but it is real good and I love it and I would see it again.
Dan, what about you?
Yeah, I'm right there as 8 as well. Like I think this is a good like starting point for this new world of Spider-Man. I think it makes me excited for what they can do. It sets up a lot of pieces without it being super obvious, without it bringing down this movie to try to build up another movie. Like I said, I think the one thing it was missing, like it didn't. There are some sequences here there which we'll get to which were dramatic, but it didn't necessarily have the weight of Spider-Man 2, and maybe I'm being nostalgic or what have you, or overly fanboyish for that film, which is fine. But it's for people saying that there's superhero fatigue. I think this kind of proves that doesn't exist as of yet, because it's the 6th Spider-Man film, the 3rd person doing it. This is the 5th Spider comic book movie of the year, and you still get this amount of enjoyment. It still does this well, and people still like it as much as they do. So I don't know where that fatigue is, but it's certainly not affecting this yet. So.
Yeah, it's just the people that speak the loudest, I think, are the ones talking about the fatigue, but not the money or the actual reception that these films seem to be getting, especially, like you said, how many different Spider-Man films we've got, different people, different reboots, different comic book films in one year. It's still being received well in all ways, shapes, and forms. So I think I'm going to be a touch below you guys, just barely. I guess maybe like 7.5. I'll go with 7.5. But I did enjoy it. It didn't wow me or anything like that. It didn't necessarily. It did wow me, I guess, with one scene or whatever, but it didn't. I guess maybe I just didn't have as much fun as I was hoping, but maybe my expectations were too high. I still really enjoyed the film. I still think it's a good film. I still really like Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and I like the way they interweave this into the Marvel Universe. So I don't have anything necessarily specific bad I want to say about it. It didn't necessarily have me jumping up and down, I guess, as I was leaving the theater, which might have gotten it up to like an 8.5, 9. But I think I'm right around 7.5 for me. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into spoiler talk and a few more superhero rankings maybe that we'll throw out there as well.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Hey guys, it's Optimus Solo and
HardCandiMandi.
And we just wanted to let you guys know about another podcast out there that we both think you would all enjoy.
It's one of both of our favorite shows to listen to, and it's none other than the True Bromance Podcast.
True Bromance is a movie podcast hosted by longtime friends Hyro and Barry, and if you like to smile, laugh, and just be genuinely entertained while listening to movie talk, then this is definitely the right show for you.
Each week, the guys break down a recently released movie, and not only do they tie in the movie that week to the beers that they are drinking during the show,
but they also tie it into a real fun top and bottom 5 list associated with that movie.
It's a blast hearing both sides of these lists, and it definitely makes them unique amongst all other movie review podcasts.
So we definitely want to recommend all of you guys to go check out their show. Just search out the True Bromance Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and all other podcast platforms. And if you listen via iTunes, do us a favor and leave them a 5-star review. And don't forget to let them know that the Cinema Geeks sent you.
On the Simplistic Reviews podcast, we talk movies. We talk TV. We talk.
Hello, Julie, what the heck are you doing?
Trying to make our spots sound more exciting by adding explosions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you could have got the point across with sound effects, not the real thing. Car.
Download the show on iTunes or at simplisticreviews.blogspot.com.
I'm sure your insurance company will cover that.
No, they won't.
No, they probably won't.
Now back to the show. Do you see how your patience paid off?
All right, thanks for sticking with us. We're back to talk a little bit about spoilers with Spider-Man Homecoming. Dan, you alluded to them the most, I think, during the regular discussion, so I'll let you go first. What did you think about some of the more spoilerific elements of Spider-Man Homecoming? Did they work? Did they not work? And expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, the Michael Keaton twist was, I think, like genius, honestly, for many different reasons. It automatically made that character more interesting. It added more personal stakes, and it was led to one of the most intense scenes of the entire film, and one of my favorites of the year so far. And a large part because of the performance of Keaton and Tom Holland, who just like the fear on his face throughout that time, it was palpable, and also kind of was repeated again in a scene that was very reminiscent of an infamous scene in a comic book, and one of the most infamous Spider-Man scenes in comics, where he's stuck under rubble, and just the fear that's coming out of his voice. It's like, wow, like this is a kid. This is a kid who's scared. And I don't think I've ever seen a Spider-Man character in a movie before be scared, or really any superhero. And I think that makes him. That's kind of why Spider-Man is so relatable, I think, as a character. And I think they really nailed it there.
I think another thing that made that so successful is how much they did not telegraph that. Like, I don't know when the last time I was that much thrown off by a twist in the film where I had absolutely no idea that was about to happen. I don't know what I necessarily thought would or would not happen. Maybe nothing. I just thought they were going to continue on as they were, but I thought they did an excellent job of not necessarily dropping hints, clues, foreshadowing that much, at least for me. Maybe I'm dumb, but I did not see that coming in any way, so I thought it worked phenomenal, and I think you used a perfect word. That scene and the emotions coming out of Tom Holland were definitely palpable. Amanda, what did you think of that little twist that they threw at us?
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. I was pretty shocked by that. I thought it was an awesome tie-in, though, and definitely bumped up the stakes, and the whole culmination of the film, coming to a head there at Homecoming, it made sense for the title. Then I didn't really get what the Homecoming tie-in was with the title, but then how everything kind of came to the head on that night definitely made sense afterwards.
I think it would have been fun to have like a camera in theaters to get like the reaction of people at that exact moment, because it was like an audible gasp or like silence or like shock and awe from at least the people that we were with. And Matt, what did you think of the twist with the Vulture, and how did that work or elevate the film overall?
I'm gonna have to throw my hat into the people that didn't see it coming like at all, like and it was like one of those moments where it's like the movie slows down right before then, and it's like, oh man, like this is gonna be like, it's gonna, it's going back to, it's like the stakes are lowering, it's gonna be a nice refreshing thing. Oh no, everything is right back. Like everything is right back. Like we're back to that tension. Like there's no reprieve. We're just immediately 100% back on. Like I was looking forward to him being a kid for a minute, and it was like, no, we're a superhero. This is a superhero movie, and it was one of those things where it's like, oh no. Like, did he murder his girlfriend, or is it like, what's going on? Like, we're immediately in a strange land and we have to find the clues to figure out what's going on. Like, it was such a great scene, done perfect. Like, I loved it.
I think you touched on a great point, that they definitely very carefully crafted it into a moment that you thought was like a relaxed moment. You're like, okay, now we're just going to get some filler where he gets to go to Homecoming and gets the girl, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really need to pay attention. And then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I am on the edge of my seat paying attention to every second of what's going on right now. So I think they did an excellent job with that. Other spoiler things, after credit comments or things like that you wanted to bring up, Dan?
I don't know. Like I talked about the action that didn't work. I guess one action sequence that did really work for me was the moment on the ferry sequence, but specifically the Washington Monument sequence. I thought that was probably the best action sequences in the movie. It was like, it showed kind of the Amanda mentioned you didn't get to see like the mind of Peter working. I thought that was like one sequence where you did see him try to have to figure things out for himself and find a way to kind of maneuver with limited resources, and it was just really very tense throughout. So
I think that scene and the one you mentioned before, when it really has nothing to web onto, where he has to more so do it by foot. I thought, I mean, I know that was a little bit more comedic, but I thought those were two scenes that worked very well as well. Amanda, any thoughts on the after credit scenes or anything else you couldn't talk about due to spoilers?
Not really, no.
Matt, what about you?
I just love how he gets found out more than once, and like how believable, like, because it's like it's really hard for a 16-year-old guy to just keep a secret identity, and how each time he gets found out like 3 or 4 times throughout this movie, how well it works and how believable it is.
All right, so that's our talk on Spider-Man Homecoming, but before we go, I want to real quick get your guys' thoughts, because Dan, you mentioned superhero fatigue. Another thing that I've heard over and over again is how bad this year is as far as blockbusters go and things like that, which is not uncommon. We seem to hear that year after year. It can't apply, though, when people are talking to superhero films, because we've had, 4 superhero films now that have all been received extremely well, both from a box office standpoint and from a critical standpoint. I mean, is this a great year for superheroes when there's supposed to be all this fatigue? And how do you try to rack and stack these 4 films? Which one's on top, and how do you stack these up?
Yeah, I think it's been a pretty solid year for comic book movies. I mean, we still have Justice League, so that could derail it all. But we also have Thor Ragnarok, so that could, that's, who knows? Maybe, they could finish out the year. I still think for me, Logan is the best. It's weird even calling that a superhero movie because it's so different than any of these. But I felt like that one I had the best reaction to. That may honestly still be my favorite movie of the year thus far. I would probably put Homecoming after that, honestly. And then what comes next, I'm not sure. I like both Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and Wonder Woman, but I think I had problems with both. Neither of the problems were enough for me to not like the movies, but they're kind of on equal footing a little bit. But for me, Logan is still far and above the best, but it's obviously a very different type of movie than Homecoming.
Absolutely. Amanda, what do you think? What's been your favorite of the 4 so far, and how do you stack them up?
Man, I would say Logan, then Guardians, then Wonder Woman, then Homecoming.
All right. Matt, what about you? What reigns supreme for you so far in the year?
Oh, man. Like, it's hard between Logan and Guardians because, like, I feel like Guardians did a lot of things that I really enjoyed. Like, just as a superhero movie, it's got more of what I want. I think Logan was probably a better movie, though. So I guess Logan, then Guardians, and then, like, Spider-Man, then Wonder Woman.
All right. I think we might be the most pro-Guardians group that I know out there, because I can't deny the amount of fun and the laughs that I got from Guardians. I still put Logan ahead of it, but maybe that's just because I'm more of someone that enjoys more of the drama and more of that type of film, separating itself a lot from the genre in many ways. So I think I would put Logan first, then Guardians, and then Homecoming, and then Wonder Woman just at the end. But I think they all 4 were real good, and I think that's impressive that we've gotten 4 superhero films that have all basically not necessarily been a miss. They haven't been bad movies. They've been successful, and it just seems to go right against what everybody's saying about these types of films and the superhero fatigue. So we'll have to see. Maybe we'll end on a sour note and get 2 bad films with Thor and Justice League, or we'll have to see how those kind of play into it. But I think it's been a surprisingly good year from all of the films we've gotten so far that are related to comic books. So you guys will have to let us know if you agree or disagree with our rankings, if you agree or disagree with our take on Spider-Man Homecoming. What is your favorite Spider-Man film after Homecoming has come out and you've seen that? Is it number 1? Do you still like one of the Tobey Maguire versions best, or what Spider-Man film ranks supreme for you? You'll have to let us know on the website. Go to geekcastradio.com. Find the episode post there and comment, and we'll definitely interact with you there. You can also interact with us social media. Facebook is Geekcast Radio, or Twitter, you can actually interact directly with the show. It's at Cinema Geekcast. You can interact with us individually as well. Amanda, how do people tweet to you?
At HardCandiMandi, eyes, no eyes.
Dan, what about you?
I'm at MovieRevolt.
Matt?
I'm at Fridley Cent.
And you can tweet to me at Optimus Solo. tweet to us, let us know what you think. We'll definitely respond and interact with you there. Also, stay tuned for some more episodes coming from the Cinema Geeks as we close out the Hayao Miyazaki Spotlight and give you a chance to vote on our next Spotlight. Also, stay up to date with our video game Spotlight as we try to get through the second half of that. And we're also getting very close to revealing our top 10 films of all time. So stay tuned for all of those things. But that's it for this week. Tune in next week for another chance to listen to the Cinema Geeks.